Hey everyone, welcome back to WCB Jazz Vinyl. So I am officially in sort of wrap-up mode for the year, and one of my favorite videos to do at the end of every year is to do a video that highlights my top favorite finds for the year, and this time we're going to do 10 of them. So of these 10, 5 of them are Blue Note, 7 of these I've never actually had originals of before ever, so implying the others would be upgrades, and 4 I've never had a copy in any shape or form of before, just in my entire time collecting. So it's been a great year. Excited to highlight these 10, and yeah, let's dive in. So as always, before we get started, please go ahead and hit subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. Costs you nothing, helps me out quite a bit. You can follow me on Instagram if you'd like. I'm at what_can_brown. And one of the upcoming videos that I have is actually going to be yet another highlighting the Pepper Adams Quintet release that my own label, Gamut, put out this year. Actually going to be doing a giveaway. So look forward to that, and certainly subscribe so that you get notified for when that video is posting, which should be in the coming days. All right, so first up is Kenny Drew's self-titled release for Riverside Records. This originally came out in 1956. This happens to be a 1958 pressing, and so you might wonder, why does this make my list for the top favorite finds, especially alongside some of these other, extremely rare titles? Well, guess what? This one actually is, even as a early reissue from 1958, it is a extremely difficult record to find. So I've never had a copy of this in any shape or form, happened upon this, and I actually made a video about this earlier in the year where I highlighted the process of taking some of the tape off. You can still see some of the remnants, but I am still quite happy to have a copy of this. So like I said, this is a 1958 pressing. Originally came out in 56. It would have come with the sort of white and blue Riverside label. This one, because it's a reissue, happens to be the deep groove sort of blue reels style of label. Happens to be in phenomenal condition as well, which I think is also sort of a contributing factor to the rarity. But listen, okay, granted, like all of the ones in this top 10 are going to be quite rare, but more than that, I've been really enjoying having copies of some of these and being able to listen to them. And this happens to be just a phenomenal record. Not every Kenny Drew record on Riverside is great. He actually has some that are very, like, I don't know, very, very sort of stale titles that were almost issued in like a different sort of series for Riverside. But this one happens to be certainly jazz forward. He is joined by who here? It's Paul Chambers on bass and Philly Joe Jones on drums. And yeah, like I said, this title just hasn't had that many reissues. Hard one to get in any form, but especially some of these early versions. All right, next one up. This is Dexter Gordon Blow's Hot and Cool, originally put out for the Dutone label. Funnily enough, this one is also an early reissue, but it's also a title that I've never had a copy of in any format. Was super excited to find this particular one. Listen, there's like any number of sort of variations of these early reissues, so it's kind of hard to pinpoint exactly what you might have. I believe that this is a 1958 pressing, which is sort of a combination of some of the icons or some of the sort of iconography down here, as well as the fact that it's the color edition on the back. But this would have originally come out in 1955. It came out on a red translucent vinyl disc, and then I believe it was also on a black disc sort of simultaneously. But then it was reissued in 56, 57, 58, and probably even beyond that. But each of these early pressings, especially especially in like the 50s, are all difficult to come by, especially in decent shape, like in a shape that you actually don't mind playing. Because listen, like 1955 does have a little bit of more of a vintage sound maybe than you'd like, especially compared to some of his titles for Blue Note. Incidentally, this is not the only Dexter that is making my top 10 list for the year. So who we have on this is Leroy Vinegar on bass, Chuck Thompson on drums, Carl Perkins on piano, Jimmy Robinson on trumpet, and of course, Dexter Gordon on tenor. All right, so number 3, this is a fun one. This is Thad Jones's Mad Thad, but rather than being the sort of the first U.S. pressing on Period Records, this is the first pressing in, I believe it's England, on the Pine Nixa label. And so they actually had an alternate cover for this title, but it is, again, it's Mad Thad, originally put out on Period Records. So the funny thing is that the original US pressing goes for sometimes over $1,000. It is just impossible to find. I've never had the opportunity to buy one. I think I've seen one on eBay like once. It's just a incredibly rare title. But the funny thing is, you can get this, which is released the very same year in London, 1957. And you can get this for like significantly less. Still expensive, but significantly less. Think like $150 to $200, somewhere in there. And of course, you get every bit of the music. So the lineup here, it's a little bit of a mixed bag in terms of there being multiple lineups that are sort of meshed together. But who we have on this includes obviously Thad Jones, Jimmy Jones, Eddie Jones, Elvin Jones, Joe Jones, Quincy Jones. Incidentally, this is a companion release to the Jones brothers, I think, or maybe it's the Jones Boys, which is also on Period Records. So in addition to all of those Joneses, many of whom are actually not related, we have Frank Foster, Frank West, Tommy Flanagan, Henry Coker, and Doug Watkins. So there is a little bit of a larger lineup here, obviously, and therefore a little bit of a larger feel to some of the pieces, but this is just fantastic playing. Some of Thad Jones's best work happens to be right here. And the really unfortunate thing is that I don't think the tapes exist because there hasn't been any attempt at any kind of like all analog reissue of this material, which is super unfortunate because it is a phenomenal record. All right, so in case you can't tell, we're actually going through the non-Blue Note stuff first, and then we'll be switching over to the Blue Note stuff in just a couple of minutes. So this next one is introducing Millie Vernon. Now, unless you're just I don't know, unless you've been collecting a while and you get kind of really into the weeds of some of these oddball titles, you may not necessarily know of this one, but it was put out on Storyville in 1956. Been barely any repressing, certainly none in the United States, at least to my knowledge. I think mostly in Japan, where this one became a little bit more popular. But you all know I love jazz vocalists, and this has just been a title that I've been looking for years and years. Never had an opportunity, and only at the Atlanta Record Show did I go to a table where they actually had a copy of this, and it was in my price range. We did a little bit of negotiating, and here it is. I'm super excited to have it because this is a title that goes for certainly hundreds of dollars. I've seen people attempt to get like $800 for it, but I didn't have to pay anything close to that. I think I ended up paying about $100 for this, incidentally. So I guess what to say about this? I mean, you are going to get those kind of 2 to 3 minute sort of tracks that are much more about highlighting the vocalist rather than the backing band, to be honest, but I still love all that stuff. For some reason, I feel like I've only been getting more into jazz vocals over this past year. Maybe that's like a theme for 2025. But in any event, there's still actually a great lineup that supports Millie Vernon here as well, including some folks you're probably going to recognize. So you have Joe Jones on drums, Jimmy Rainey on guitar, Dave McKenna on piano, Ruby Braff on trumpet, and of course, Millie Vernon on vocals. So yeah, never had a copy of this in my life, and now I do, and it's just I don't know, like, listen, every collector has those titles that continue to elude them, right? That you save the searches for on eBay, and you look for these titles for a long time, and it's seldom that one actually comes your way, and it isn't, and you're in a situation, I guess, where you can actually afford it and justify the purchase. So this was one of those situations, and out of all of these, this might actually be the rarest one that I was able to pick up in 2025. All right, the next one is by Khalik Al-Roof and Salam, and it is called The Elephant Trot Dance. Now, what I just said probably is going to be the first time that anybody's heard sort of those words together. You probably are going to have no idea that this record even exists, except listen, I know there's a lot of passionate jazz appreciators out there, and maybe some of you will be aware of this, but this originally came out on Nilva Records, which was Alvin Queen's label. They put out stuff, I think, mostly in the 70s, maybe into the early 80s, and I'm actually a big fan of the label. They would highlight musicians that maybe perhaps had their day, say, earlier in their career, and this is a little bit later for them, but there's some phenomenal music, phenomenally recorded music that was put out on the Nilva Records label. The very first title, I believe it was the first, that was put out on the label, though, is an oddball because it wasn't released in the United States. It was, I believe, a Switzerland only release, and then the rest of the catalog was released in the United States. So anyway, I can't show you what this looks like because I was only able to get the disc. And even just having the disc makes it into, like, brings it into one of my top finds for the year. So this is an incredibly difficult record to get. The music is amazing, and I had previewed the music some years prior, and that's the reason why I've been after this. So get this. They've blocked this record for sale on Discogs for reasons that I don't fully understand. I think there's some note on Discogs about making sure that people who want the music are going to the source, which is the license holder for the music. But that doesn't make any sense because you have to be able to, as long as something's not a bootleg, you should be able to transact the these used records. And for some reason, Discogs agreed to it. And now you can't buy it. You can search for it on Discogs, but you can't buy it on Discogs, which, if you're taking out a big channel like that, makes it even harder. Apparently, this is in the, there's a reissue in the works of this record. I'll believe it when I see it, but I'm just happy to be able to even have the disc. And I'll show you a picture of what the cover looks like. It's I think it's pretty cool. So you're probably not going to know too many of the folks here in the lineup, although Alvin Queen is in the lineup, a couple of other folks, but maybe the thing to point out, just as a point of reference, is that Salam, the artist billed as Salam here, he is actually on a Strata East release from 1974 that's called the Ensemble Al Salam. So that is the same artist that is represented on this album, just kind of 5 years apart. So, will I ever find an original cover? Definitely not, right? Like, you're certainly not just the cover. It's possible I'll be able to find another copy of this at some point in the distant future, but it sure took me a long time to find this. And listen, like, I'm fine having this. Obviously, it'd be great if they end up if that reissue that's referenced on Discogs actually comes to fruition. All right, so now shifting to the Blue Note titles. So these are always fun, right? Like, I do have the bulk of the Blue Note catalog in terms of original pressings. Now, I've made videos in the past that highlight how not all of mine are necessarily in great shape, but over time I've been upgrading titles, and it sure is easier to justify maybe spending even a little bit more in order to get an upgrade, knowing that you already have a copy that you can then kind of flip, right, to offset the purchase. So that is the case with a few of these, although 2 of these I've never had a vintage pressing of whatsoever. So the first ones I want to highlight are actually a really interesting, it's kind of like an interesting story, like brief story or situation on eBay, where there was one seller who kept listing rare Blue Note titles. Some of them even had review stamps on the back of them. This is like a couple of months ago, I think. I'd have to go back and check. But what happened is they put out, I think it was an auction for like Herbie Hancock's Maiden Voyage, something like that, and I missed it. But I saw that it had recently sold, and it was for a ridiculous price. It was like $80. And I looked at the pictures. I don't think the seller knew whether or not what they had was original, but the pictures sure made it seem like it was in fantastic shape. And I saw that $80 that somebody else got for that record. I think it was around that price point. And I was, I got to be honest, I was disappointed, right? Because eBay is a little bit of a competition, and I sure would have loved to have bought that record for $80. So what did I do? I followed that seller and refreshed their auction page for a good little while. Certainly immediately after that Herbie Hancock title sold. And then over the course of several days, they started posting more. And I got to be honest, I wasn't always the one to be there on the computer ready to click buy, but they kept putting out more Blue Notes and some other records as well for prices that, don't get me wrong, they all started escalating after that Maiden Voyage sold. I think it's because they realized, people actually are willing to pay these prices. Let's try to list these next ones for more. But each time that I bought one, I was still getting, in my opinion, a great deal. So enough preamble. The first one that I want to share is Wayne Shorter's Speak No Evil. So this is an original stereo pressing, has the ear in the run out. This one happens to have the review copy stamp on the back as well. I don't have that many Blue Note titles that have that review copy stamp, so it's kind of a fun thing. Best part is this is in phenomenal shape, like borderline unplayed kind of thing. I mean, I oftentimes make fun of people who say unplayed because who really knows? But all indications are that this hasn't been played much. So obviously really exciting to be able to get this. It was a buy it now for, I think it was $170 or so, or maybe it was like 160 something. So then add tax and shipping on top of that. But just a phenomenal deal for this record. The funny thing is I already have a mono pressing that is also in really, really nice shape. So the question becomes, what do I do with the mono and a stereo? Probably don't need both, probably need to sell one of them. And I'll be doing that as soon as I get around to figuring out which one I'm going to keep. All right, next one up was actually the same seller. It was listed just a couple of days later. And again, I was the lucky one to refresh the auction page. It popped up as a buy it now for something like $180. So again, I mentioned before that the prices started to escalate just kind of a little bit with each next auction. But still at a price point that I was willing to jump for. So this is Dexter Gordon's One Flight Up. Again, I already have a pressing of this. I believe that mine is a mono as well, and so this is a stereo. Same situation, right? As that Wayne Shorter. I'm going to have to do some comparing and figure out what I'm going to do. But I couldn't, even though I had a copy, I couldn't leave it there for $180 or whatever it was. This is a phenomenal record. I know I said earlier that it wasn't going to be the only Dexter title, right? This is actually, I think there's still one more coming from Dexter. So it's been a Dexter heavy year in 2025. But this for me is one of, if not my favorite of his, if not my like number one favorite of his albums that he ever did. It sounds amazing. The music here is particularly inspired. This is kind of an interesting time period for him because I believe he was living in Paris. But on this, you have Donald Byrd, obviously Dexter, Kenny Drew, Niels Henning, Orsted Pedersen, and then Art Taylor. Yeah, just an absolute classic. And it's times like this where I'm so surprised still that there are deals to be had on eBay. I know probably people think $180. Is that a deal? For this one, it is. They knew they had something, but they didn't know exactly what they had, I guess. Because in my opinion, this could have probably, in this condition, because the vinyl's in fantastic shape as well. In my opinion, this could have been listed for, I don't know, like $700 or something like that, and probably still been bought by somebody. So I think I did pretty well with this. This is the second of 3 titles that I got from this particular seller. All right, next one from that same eBay seller is another Dexter Gordon title, and that is Go. This is a stereo edition, original pressing. This auction came up just a day after that One Flight Up. And again, even though the prices had escalated actually quite a bit for these in terms of the buy it nows. So if we started in that kind of like mid hundreds, or 180 kind of mark for some of those other titles that I just referenced, this one I believe was around $300. And yet, because I was so confident from having purchased those other ones that were in such stellar condition, I thought, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and buy this. This is one of the most expensive records that I bought all of 2025. And yet I still think it ended up being a great deal. Already have a copy, so obviously I'm going to be able to compare and try to flip one of them and make, certainly I'd like to think all of my money back. It depends on the shape of my other copy. But again, another classic one. On this record with Dexter Gordon, you do have Sonny Clark, you have Butch Warren and Billy Higgins, so it's a quartet format as opposed to that quintet format on the other one. But obviously phenomenal, iconic album, iconic cover design, and yeah, just again another example of I guess the how you can benefit from being diligent just a little bit on eBay. Like, listen, I'm not the person who's on eBay all day. In fact, I'm probably on eBay for maybe 20 minutes every day, something like that, like an aggregate. I'll just check in every now and then. But for this little moment when this seller was actually actively listing records, because they haven't been for weeks now. If they were, I wouldn't even be making this video because I'd want to not signal that this seller was out there. But for anyway, for this little moment on eBay, I spent a little bit more time those couple of days, but yeah, just really really good luck, and especially surprising for 2025. All right, these last two also Blue Note, not online purchases though. These were from a sort of a connection that I had, somebody who was selling sort of across the country. I ended up interacting with him as much as maybe a year and a half ago, and we just stayed in touch. And over a period of time, he decided to sell some of the gems from his collection, and these next two are certainly gems. So what I want to show you is J.R. Monaros. So this is a original pressing for Blue Note. Came out probably in what, 56 or 57. The catalog number is 1536, so it's relatively early. On this one, you have Ira Sullivan, obviously JR, you have Horace Silver, Wilbur Ware, and Philly Joe Jones. And here, actually, I'll show you what the label looks like, because it's one of those fun early Lexingtons, right? So this is a title that I've had a United Artists pressing of it in the past. I think that I might have had like a Disc Union DBLP series of it in the past, but I've never had the opportunity to own an original. And even within the context of rare Blue Notes, this one certainly has to be up there in terms of the difficulty of finding a copy of this that's actually in playable condition, right? So I was just, over the moon with being able to get a copy of this finally in my collection, and have it be a copy that I can play it and I can enjoy it. And obviously the music's fantastic. I mean, J.R. Monaros is one of those guys who just feels like he wasn't recorded enough, but everything he plays on is always excellent. So yeah, I mean, it's easy to see why this would make my my top 10 for the year. It's been a gap in the collection for years and years, and one of those that I just thought I would never ever own. All right, and finally, number 10, another 1500 series Blue Note that I think I've only had a Music Matters of this before. Certainly never a vintage, or certainly not an original pressing like this one is. So catalog number 1567. This is Curtis Fuller's The Opener. Criminally few reissues of this one, but absolutely phenomenal music. You have Hank Mobley, Bobby Timmons, Paul Chambers, and Art Taylor on this one. Again, this was one of the titles that I was able to get through my sort of connect that I had, and I was buying from him over a period of time, and he eventually decided to sell some of his top titles, and this is certainly one of them. Again, couldn't even believe that I had the opportunity to get this, and for a reasonable price. So obviously, yeah, just really excited about being able to have this. And again, it's like some of these Curtis Fuller ones I think are absolutely fantastic, and yet they just didn't really get the same level of attention over the years by some of the reissue outfits, or attention from listeners, I think. I'll be honest, I'm the first person to say that I'm not always the biggest fan of jazz trombone, but certainly selectively, whether select albums or select artists, I can be a big fan, and this is certainly a great example. And I think part of it too is, don't get me wrong, it's the lineup that he plays with, but this is just it's phenomenal music. And again, it had been a gap in my collection. Have a lot of Blue Notes, but never had this. And so, obviously had to take the opportunity to grab it. All right, so there we have it. Those are the top 10. And, I know that these types of lists tend to sort of coalesce around rarity, right? Rather than, say, the music that I was the most happy with, or maybe those albums that I discovered that I, was some of the most exciting discoveries for me of the year. But this one did kind of take a little bit of a tone of, here's the rare titles that I was able to add to the collection. But, that's just kind of what I did for this one. I feel like lately a lot of my videos have been focused more on the reissues. And part of that part of that I think is like a little bit of a feeling of obligation, especially if I get sent something, or if there's a particularly exciting title that I feel like it would be fun to address and talk about because it hasn't been reissued in a while, or because it's a audiophile treatment, right? And so I feel like I've been focusing a lot of my videos around that, and I often neglect the vintage records, which, let's be real, still makes up 90 to 95% of my collection. So nice to sort of sneak one in here towards the end of the year. Otherwise, later on this year, I'm really hoping I have time to do everything I want to in terms of sort of other roundup videos for 2025. I know I mentioned that I'm going to be doing the Pepper Adams Quintet giveaway video very, very soon. It may indeed be my next video. So, like I said, do subscribe because I'm excited about being able to give a copy of that away. I'm also going to be doing another year in review. So if you recall from prior years, right around this time, or maybe at the beginning of the year in prior years, what I talk about is how did I do with my New Year's resolutions that I made at the beginning of the year, and what are my resolutions for the next year, as well as what are my predictions for the vinyl market. And these are like some of the videos that I honestly probably put the most time into, and I really enjoy making them because I just think it's fun. So those will be coming up very soon. Also going to be doing a top reissues of the year, my favorite reissues of the year. And then I really want to do a top new albums of the year, like new music. What are the new, what are the artists that are alive today that are producing amazing music? What are the best albums that I think were made for this year? And I know we've already been seeing the professional reviewers post theirs, like NPR, New York Times, etc. Mine's always different. I pay attention to what they do, but usually I build up my own list before their lists come out, and I don't think I particularly change them. So anyway, I love offering that perspective as well, and I am excited about all the new artists that are recording these days. In addition to all of these, all the vintage stuff. So that's a little bit about what we have coming up in the coming weeks and days. So stay tuned for that. Thanks everyone for your time, and I'll see you next time.